Picture this. You wake up at dawn, strap on your bronze-tipped spear, and march off to what you think will be another routine day protecting the most powerful ruler on Earth. Except, here's the thing. You're about to discover that guarding a pharaoh in ancient Egypt wasn't just difficult. It was absolutely brutal, politically deadly, and would probably kill you in ways you never saw coming. Today we're diving deep into why you, yes you, would completely fail as an ancient pharaoh's guard. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these elite warriors were considered some of the most expendable people in the entire kingdom. But first, let me show you just how insanely demanding this job really was. The ancient Egyptian royal guard wasn't just about standing around looking intimidating with a fancy headdress. These men faced challenges that would make modern special forces training look like a weekend camping trip. We're talking about a job where political mistakes meant torture, where religious duties could get you cursed by the gods, and where a single moment of weakness could result in your entire family being wiped from history. I've spent months researching ancient Egyptian military records, archaeological evidence, and hieroglyphic accounts to uncover the brutal reality of what it meant to protect a living god. What I found will shock you. The average lifespan of a pharaoh's guard was terrifyingly short, and the reasons why will make you grateful you live in the 21st century. So grab something to drink, get comfortable, and prepare to learn why your modern survival instincts, physical capabilities, and mental conditioning would crumble faster than a sandcastle in a desert storm when faced with the impossible demands of ancient royal protection duty. Let's start with the most obvious problem you'd face: the sheer physical brutality of the training process. Modern military boot camps push recruits to their limits, but ancient Egyptian guard training was designed to literally kill the weak. Prospective guards underwent months of conditioning in the scorching desert heat with minimal water, carrying equipment that weighed more than most people today could even lift. Your training would begin before sunrise, with a 5-mile run across burning sand dunes while wearing full bronze armor. Remember, this isn't lightweight modern gear. We're talking about hammered bronze plates that could weigh up to 60 pounds, with no padding underneath except rough linen that would chafe your skin raw within hours. The sand would get into every crevice of your equipment, creating an abrasive nightmare that would leave you bleeding and exhausted. But that's just the warm-up. Next came weapon training with implements you've probably never held in your life. Ancient Egyptian spears were 12 feet long and required incredible upper body strength to wield effectively. The khopesh, their signature curved sword, demanded years of practice to master its unique cutting angles. Your soft, modern hands would be torn to shreds within days of handling these brutal weapons. The worst part? There was no medical support when you inevitably injured yourself. Ancient Egyptian medicine, while advanced for its time, couldn't handle the constant stream of training injuries. Broken bones were set with primitive splints, deep cuts were sealed with honey and linen, and infections were treated with prayers and herbal remedies that rarely worked. Many recruits died not from combat, but from infected training wounds that modern antibiotics could cure in days. Your body, accustomed to air conditioning, comfortable beds, and regular meals, would be in constant revolt against the harsh conditions. Ancient guards slept on stone floors, ate the same bland barley porridge every day, and worked in temperatures that regularly exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Your modern constitution simply wasn't built for this level of sustained physical punishment. Now let's talk about something even more dangerous than the physical demands: the political minefield you'd be navigating every single day. As a pharaoh's guard, you weren't just protecting a person. You were protecting a living god whose every whim could reshape the kingdom, and whose enemies included some of the most cunning political operators in the ancient world. Palace intrigue in ancient Egypt made modern political scandals look like children's games. Priests plotted against pharaohs. Royal family members schemed for succession, and foreign ambassadors constantly worked to undermine Egyptian power. As a guard, you'd be expected to identify threats that master manipulators had spent years concealing. Here's where your modern instincts would completely betray you. You're used to obvious enemies, clear hierarchies, and straightforward conflicts. But in the Pharaoh's court, the person bringing you food might be poisoning your lord. The priest conducting daily rituals could be planning a coup. And the visiting diplomat expressing friendship might be gathering intelligence for an invasion. Your training in modern critical thinking would actually work against you. Ancient Egyptian society operated on completely different principles of loyalty, honor, and divine authority. Questioning orders, even silently, was considered not just insubordination, but actual blasphemy against the gods. The analytical mindset that serves you well today would be seen as dangerous skepticism that marked you as untrustworthy. The political consequences of failure were absolutely terrifying. If an assassin reached the pharaoh on your watch, it wasn't just you who would pay the price. Your entire family lineage would be erased from history. Your name would be chiseled off monuments. Your property would be confiscated, and your children would be sold into slavery, or worse. Ancient Egyptians took collective punishment to levels that would horrify modern sensibilities. Even success came with political dangers. Guards who became too trusted by the pharaoh often found themselves targeted by rival factions who saw them as threats to their own influence. Your loyalty to the pharaoh could make you enemies among the very priests and nobles you were supposed to protect him from. Many guards who served faithfully for years were eventually executed on trumped-up charges when political winds shifted. But perhaps the most alien aspect of this job would be the religious expectations placed upon you. Modern people tend to think of religion as a personal choice, something practiced during specific times and places. For a pharaoh's guard, religious duty was a constant, overwhelming responsibility that determined every aspect of your existence. You would be expected to maintain ritual purity at all times, which meant following hundreds of specific dietary restrictions, cleansing rituals, and behavioral codes that governed everything from how you walked to how you breathed in the pharaoh's presence. Breaking any of these rules wasn't just a mistake, it was a sin that could anger the gods and bring divine punishment upon the entire kingdom. The daily religious obligations alone would exhaust you. Before dawn, prayers, midday offerings, evening ceremonies, and midnight vigils created a schedule that left virtually no time for rest. You'd need to memorize countless prayers in ancient Egyptian, perform complex ritual gestures with perfect precision, and maintain absolute reverence, even when exhausted, injured, or terrified. Your modern secular worldview would make these demands nearly impossible to fulfill authentically. Ancient Egyptians genuinely believed that the pharaoh was the living embodiment of Horus, that the gods actively intervened in daily affairs, and that ritual mistakes could literally cause the Nile to stop flooding or the sun to disappear from the sky. This wasn't just cultural theatre, it was existential reality for everyone in that society. Your inability to fully embrace these beliefs would show in subtle ways that ancient Egyptians, raised from birth in this religious worldview, would immediately recognize. Your skepticism, no matter how well hidden, would mark you as spiritually dangerous and ultimately unsuitable for protecting their god-king. The psychological pressure of maintaining this level of religious devotion while facing constant physical danger and political threats would break most modern minds within weeks. You'd be living in a state of perpetual anxiety, knowing that a single mistake in any of these areas could result in your torture, execution, and the destruction of everyone you cared about. But wait, it gets even worse. The combat scenarios you'd face would be unlike anything your modern mind could prepare for. When we think about protection duty today, we imagine clear rules of engagement, backup support, and advanced warning systems. Ancient pharaohs faced threats that came without warning, from directions you'd never expect, using methods that would seem impossible to anticipate. Assassination attempts in ancient Egypt were works of art in their brutality and creativity. Poisoned jewelry that killed through skin contact. Trained animals released during ceremonies. Explosive devices hidden in religious offerings. Cursed objects that were believed to kill through supernatural means, but actually contained deadly toxins. Your modern training in spotting obvious weapons like guns or knives would be completely useless against threats you'd never encountered. The weapons you'd face in combat were designed specifically to counter the armor and tactics of Egyptian guards. Enemy assassins studied your equipment, your formations, and your weaknesses for months before striking. They knew exactly where your bronze armor was thinnest, which angles would bypass your shield, and how to disable your spear before you could use it effectively. Your reflexes, trained on modern threats, would be catastrophically slow against ancient weapons. A sling stone travels at over 100 miles per hour and makes almost no sound before impact. A properly thrown javelin could punch through your bronze armor like it was made of paper. Curved daggers could slide between armor plates in ways that straight blades couldn't, and poisoned arrows would kill you even from minor wounds. The combat itself would be nothing like the choreographed fights you've seen in movies. Real ancient warfare was chaotic, brutal, and terrifyingly personal. You'd be fighting in close quarters where you could smell your enemy's breath, hear their grunts of effort, and feel their blood splashing on your face. There were no clean kills, no heroic last stands, just desperate struggles between exhausted men trying to survive. Your modern squeamishness about violence would be a fatal weakness. Ancient guards were expected to torture information from captured assassins, execute prisoners without hesitation, and sometimes kill innocent people who might pose future threats. The psychological conditioning required to perform these acts while maintaining loyalty and sanity was something that took years to develop. Even worse, you'd be fighting against opponents who had been raised from childhood specifically to kill people like you. Enemy kingdoms trained their assassins from birth, teaching them Egyptian customs, language, and military tactics so they could infiltrate the pharaoh's court undetected. You'd be facing professionals who knew your weaknesses better than you knew them yourself. The medical reality of ancient combat would finish you off, even if you survived the initial fighting. Wounds that modern medicine could easily treat would become infected death sentences in ancient Egypt. A simple cut from a dirty blade could lead to gangrene that would slowly consume your limb. Broken bones would heal crooked, leaving you permanently disabled. Head injuries that cause concussions would go untreated, leading to brain damage that would affect you for life. But perhaps the most terrifying aspect of combat duty was the knowledge that retreat was never an option. Modern soldiers have extraction protocols, medical evacuation, and rules that prioritize their survival alongside mission success. Ancient pharaoh guards were expected to die before allowing their lord to be harmed, and this wasn't just military doctrine, it was religious law. Your death in service to the pharaoh was considered the highest honor possible, a guarantee of eternal paradise in the afterlife. But this meant that your commanders would deliberately put you in impossible situations, knowing that your death was not just acceptable, but preferable to any scenario where the pharaoh might be endangered. The weapons training alone would break your modern body within weeks. Ancient Egyptian combat techniques required muscle memory that took decades to develop properly. The way you held a spear, moved your feet, or positioned your shield had to become so automatic that you could perform these actions while exhausted, injured, or in complete darkness. Your soft, modern hands would be destroyed by the constant gripping of rough wooden weapon handles. Ancient guards developed calluses so thick they were like natural armor, but building up this protection was an agonizing process that involved months of painful blisters and torn skin. Many recruits quit during this phase simply because they couldn't endure the constant pain in their hands. The shield work required for pharaoh protection was particularly brutal. Egyptian shields were heavy wooden constructs reinforced with bronze that weighed up to 30 pounds each. You'd need to hold these shields steady for hours at a time, while maintaining perfect formation with dozens of other guards. Your modern arm strength, built through occasional gym visits, would fail within minutes of real shield wall combat. Spear fighting demanded a level of coordination between your entire body that would take years to master. Ancient Egyptian spears were balanced for specific throwing distances and required perfect timing to be effective. You'd need to judge wind speed, target movement, and trajectory calculations while under extreme stress and physical exhaustion. The psychological warfare you'd face would be equally devastating to your modern sensibilities. Enemy kingdoms employed specialists whose only job was to break the morale of Pharaoh guards before battles even began. They would spread rumors about your family being captured, display the mutilated bodies of previous guards, and use religious symbols to convince you that the gods had abandoned your cause. These psychological attacks were incredibly sophisticated and targeted your specific cultural background and personal fears. Enemy intelligence networks would spend months learning about individual guards, their families, their religious beliefs, and their personal weaknesses. When the attacks came, they would be precisely calibrated to destroy your mental resilience. Your modern understanding of psychological manipulation would offer no protection against techniques that had been refined over centuries of warfare. Ancient Egyptians understood fear, honor, and loyalty in ways that were fundamentally different from modern concepts, and enemy psychological warfare was designed to exploit these specific cultural vulnerabilities. The social isolation you'd experience would compound all these other pressures. Ancient Pharaoh guards were forbidden from forming close friendships outside their unit, marrying without permission, or maintaining contact with their original families. This isolation was designed to ensure absolute loyalty to the pharaoh, but it also meant that you'd have no emotional support system to help you cope with the constant stress and trauma. Your fellow guards would be your only companions, but they were also your direct competitors for the pharaoh's favor and the limited opportunities for advancement within the royal guard. Trust was a luxury that could get you killed if you chose the wrong person to confide in. Many guards lived their entire careers without forming a single genuine friendship. The cultural barriers you'd face would be overwhelming. Ancient Egyptian society operated according to complex hierarchical systems that determined everything from how you spoke to different people to which foods you were allowed to eat. Making a mistake in protocol wasn't just embarrassing, it could be interpreted as deliberate disrespect that warranted severe punishment. The dietary restrictions alone would systematically destroy your health in ways you've never imagined. As a pharaoh's guard, your food wasn't just fuel for your body, it was a religious statement that could determine your spiritual fate. You'd be required to eat only specific animals that had been ritually slaughtered according to precise ceremonies, prepared by priests who had undergone purification rituals, and blessed by temple officials who could trace their lineage back generations. Your modern digestive system, accustomed to processed foods, preservatives, and a varied international diet, would rebel against the monotonous ancient Egyptian guard rations. Barley bread so coarse it would tear up your mouth. Dried fish that had been preserved in salt for months until it resembled leather more than food. Beer that was thick, cloudy, and often contaminated with bacteria that would send you into violent fits of dysentery. The water situation would be your first major crisis. Ancient Egyptian guards couldn't just turn on a tap when they were thirsty. Water had to be carried in leather containers that gave it a horrible taste, stored in vessels that accumulated algae and insects, and rationed so carefully that you'd be in a constant state of dehydration. The Nile water that sustained Egyptian civilization was also teeming with parasites that would colonize your intestines and slowly drain your strength over months of infection. Your modern immune system, weakened by antibiotics and sanitized environments, would be completely overwhelmed by the disease burden of ancient Egypt. Guards were expected to maintain peak physical condition while battling constant intestinal worms, skin infections, respiratory ailments, and blood-borne parasites that would leave you weak feverish, and struggling to perform your duties. But the real nightmare would be the sleep deprivation. Modern people think they understand what it means to be tired after staying up late or working long hours. Ancient Pharaoh guards operated on a rotation system that would make modern military sleep schedules look luxurious by comparison. 4-hour watches, 2-hour rest periods, constant alert status that meant you could never truly relax, even when off duty. Your sleep, when you could get it, would be interrupted by nightmares that ancient Egyptians believed were messages from the gods. Dreams of failure, death, and divine punishment would plague your unconscious mind as your brain struggled to process the constant stress and trauma of guard duty. Many guards developed what we would recognize today as severe PTSD, but ancient Egyptians interpreted these symptoms as signs of spiritual weakness or divine displeasure. The sleeping arrangements would be another form of torture, designed to keep you constantly uncomfortable and alert. Stone floors, thin reed mats, no pillows, and communal sleeping quarters where dozens of armed men tried to rest while remaining ready for instant action. The snoring, shifting, and sleep-talking of your fellow guards would ensure that even your brief rest periods provided little actual recovery. Your circadian rhythms, evolved for modern lighting and regular schedules, would be completely disrupted by the demands of ancient guard duty. Oil lamps provided flickering, inadequate light that strained your eyes and cast dancing shadows that made you jump at every movement. The constant vigilance required to distinguish between harmless shadows and potential threats would exhaust your nervous system within days. Temperature regulation would be another constant battle that your modern physiology wasn't equipped to handle. Ancient Egyptian guard stations had no climate control, no insulation, and no protection from the extreme temperature swings of desert environments. You'd bake during the day in bronze armor that conducted heat like an oven, then shiver through cold nights, wearing the same metal equipment that now sucked warmth from your body. The hygiene situation would break down your health and morale faster than almost any other factor. Ancient guards had no soap, no toothbrushes, no deodorant, and extremely limited access to bathing water. Your modern standards of cleanliness would become a distant memory as you lived in the same clothes for weeks, accumulated layers of sweat and grime, and developed skin conditions that would make every movement painful. Your hair would become matted with dust and oil, your teeth would decay from the coarse diet and lack of dental care, and your body would develop a permanent odor that marked you as a member of the warrior class. This wasn't just uncomfortable, it was strategically dangerous because enemies could track guards by scent alone when infiltrating the palace complex. The social dynamics within the guard unit would create additional psychological pressure that would slowly drive you insane. Ancient Egyptian military culture was built around concepts of honor, shame, and hierarchy that would be completely alien to your modern sensibilities. Showing weakness, asking for help, or admitting fear wasn't just discouraged, it was seen as a character flaw that made you unworthy of protecting the pharaoh. Your fellow guards would be constantly evaluating your performance, looking for signs of weakness they could exploit to improve their own standing within the unit. This created an atmosphere of perpetual competition where genuine cooperation was rare and trust was a liability that could be used against you. The hazing rituals designed to test new guards would push you beyond any limits you thought you possessed. Veteran guards would subject you to physical challenges, psychological torture, and humiliation designed to break down your individual identity and rebuild you as a weapon in service to the pharaoh. Many recruits suffered permanent physical damage during these initiation rites. Your modern concept of individual rights and personal dignity would be systematically destroyed through these rituals. Ancient Egyptian guard culture required absolute submission to authority, unquestioning obedience to orders, and complete suppression of personal desires or opinions. The psychological conditioning necessary to achieve this transformation would leave permanent scars on your mental health. The language barriers you'd face would compound every other challenge. Ancient Egyptian wasn't just a different language, it was an entirely different way of thinking about reality. Military commands, religious instructions, and social protocols all use specialized terminology that carried layers of meaning you'd never fully grasp. Your inability to understand subtle linguistic cues would constantly put you at disadvantage in situations where misunderstanding could be fatal. A mispronounced word during a religious ceremony could be interpreted as deliberate blasphemy. Missing the emotional undertones in a superior's command could result in punishment for insubordination you didn't even realize you had committed. The written hieroglyphic system would be completely beyond your comprehension, leaving you illiterate in a society where written orders, religious texts, and intelligence reports were crucial for effective guard duty. You'd be dependent on others to interpret written information, creating vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit and limiting your ability to advance within the guard hierarchy. Even the basic concept of time would be foreign to your modern understanding. Ancient Egyptians measured time by the position of stars, the flooding of the Nile, and religious calendar systems that bore no resemblance to modern schedules. Your internal clock, calibrated to artificial lighting and digital timekeepers, would be completely useless for coordinating activities or understanding when important events were supposed to occur. The equipment maintenance required for ancient guard duty would be a full-time job in itself. Your bronze weapons and armor required constant care to prevent corrosion, sharpening to maintain effectiveness, and repairs that demanded metalworking skills you'd never developed. A neglected spear point or corroded armor joint could mean the difference between life and death in combat. Your modern tools and techniques would be worthless for maintaining ancient Egyptian military equipment. Bronze required different care than steel. Leather armor needed specific treatments to remain flexible, and wooden components had to be protected from insects and humidity using methods that took years to master. The supply chain for replacement equipment was unreliable and often disrupted by political conflicts or natural disasters. When your gear broke, you might wait months for replacements while continuing to perform guard duty with substandard equipment that put your life at greater risk. Risk. The financial reality of ancient guard duty would devastate your modern expectations of fair compensation and economic security. While Hollywood depicts royal guards as wealthy elite warriors, the truth was far more brutal. Ancient Pharaoh guards were paid primarily in rations, basic equipment, and promises of afterlife rewards that did nothing to support their families during their actual lifetimes. Your salary would consist mainly of barley, beer, and occasional portions of dried meat that barely sustained basic survival. There were no retirement plans, no disability benefits, and no life insurance for your family if you died in service. The economic uncertainty would create constant anxiety as you watched your loved ones struggle financially, while you risked your life daily for a ruler who viewed you as completely expendable. The opportunity costs of guard service would destroy any chance of building wealth or developing alternative skills. While other men learned trades, started businesses, or accumulated property, you'd be locked into a military career that offered no transferable skills for civilian life. Your entire economic future would depend on the whims of rulers who could be overthrown, assassinated, or simply decide they no longer needed your services. Ancient Egyptian taxation systems meant that even your meager guard wages were subject to deductions for temple offerings, military equipment maintenance, and various fees that left you with almost nothing for personal use. You'd be perpetually in debt to military suppliers, forced to borrow money at crushing interest rates just to maintain the equipment necessary for your job. The technological limitations you'd face would make every aspect of guard duty exponentially more difficult than modern security work. Ancient surveillance consisted of human observers who could be bribed, distracted, or eliminated by clever enemies. There were no cameras, no electronic sensors, no communication devices that could instantly alert other guards to threats. Your intelligence gathering would rely entirely on human sources, whose reliability was always questionable. Informants could be double agents, witnesses could be lying, and rumors could be deliberately planted to mislead guard forces. The information you received would be days or weeks old by the time it reached you, making it nearly useless for preventing immediate threats. Communication during emergencies would be limited to shouting, horn signals, or messenger runners who could be intercepted or delayed by enemy action. Coordinating defensive responses with other guard units would be almost impossible during chaotic situations when split-second timing could mean the difference between success and catastrophic failure. Your weapons technology would be primitive beyond anything you can imagine. Bronze weapons dulled quickly, broke under stress, and required constant maintenance that took time away from actual guard duties. Arrow points were inconsistent in quality, spear shafts cracked without warning, and shields developed weak spots that enemies learned to exploit. The medical technology available for treating combat injuries would horrify anyone accustomed to modern healthcare. Battlefield surgery was performed without anesthesia, using bronze knives that weren't properly sterilized. Infection rates were astronomical, and most wounds that modern medics could easily treat would result in permanent disability or death. Ancient Egyptian physicians had no understanding of germ theory, blood circulation, or basic anatomy that modern first aid courses take for granted. Their treatments often made injuries worse, and their diagnostic methods were based on religious beliefs rather than scientific observation. You'd be more likely to die from the cure than from your original wound. The psychological toll of watching fellow guards die from treatable conditions would add another layer of trauma to an already overwhelming job. Modern soldiers at least know that good medical care is available if they're wounded. Ancient guards knew that any injury could be a death sentence, creating constant anxiety that affected their combat effectiveness and mental stability. Your modern understanding of human rights and ethical treatment would be completely incompatible with ancient Egyptian military justice. Guards who failed in their duties faced punishments that included torture, mutilation, and execution methods designed to serve as examples to other potential failures. There were no appeals processes, no legal representation, and no concept of proportional punishment. Military discipline was maintained through fear rather than professional standards. Guards were expected to inform on each other for any signs of disloyalty, creating an atmosphere of paranoia where friendships were dangerous and trust was a luxury that could get you killed. The psychological pressure of living under constant surveillance by your own comrades would break most modern minds within weeks. The religious aspects of punishment would be particularly terrifying for someone with modern secular sensibilities. Ancient Egyptians believed that certain crimes against the pharaoh would result in spiritual punishments that continued into the afterlife. Guards who failed in their duties weren't just facing death, they were facing eternal torture by demons and gods who would pursue their souls through multiple reincarnations. These religious beliefs weren't just cultural traditions, they were genuinely held convictions that shaped every decision guards made. The terror of divine punishment was often more effective than physical threats because it couldn't be escaped through death or clever planning. Your modern skepticism about religious authority would offer no protection against the genuine fear that permeated ancient Egyptian military culture. The administrative burden of guard duty would consume enormous amounts of time and energy that you'd need for actual security work. Ancient Egyptian bureaucracy required detailed written reports, ritual observations, and ceremonial duties that had nothing to do with protecting the pharaoh but were considered essential parts of the job. Your inability to read and write hieroglyphics would make these administrative tasks nearly impossible to complete correctly. You'd be dependent on scribes who might deliberately sabotage your reports or charge fees you couldn't afford for their services. Administrative mistakes could be interpreted as signs of incompetence or disloyalty that resulted in severe punishments. The record-keeping systems were designed to track every aspect of guard performance, creating permanent documentation of any failures or mistakes that could be used against you years later. Ancient Egyptian administrators kept detailed files on individual guards that included not just military performance, but also personal relationships, religious observance, and family backgrounds. This comprehensive surveillance meant that you could never truly escape your past mistakes or start fresh in a new position. Every error would follow you throughout your career, limiting advancement opportunities and creating vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit to blackmail or manipulate you. The seasonal challenges of guard duty would test your endurance in ways that modern climate-controlled environments never prepare you for. Ancient Egypt's agricultural cycles created different security threats throughout the year, from flood seasons that made travel difficult to harvest times that brought increased numbers of foreign visitors and potential assassins. So there you have it. The brutal, unforgiving reality of why you'd completely fail as an ancient pharaoh's guard. From the bone-crushing physical training that would destroy your modern body to the psychological warfare that would shatter your mind. From the political intrigue that would get your entire family executed to the religious demands that would consume your soul. Every single aspect of this job was designed to push human beings beyond their breaking point, and frankly, most of them didn't survive it. The next time you complain about your morning commute or a difficult boss, just remember that at least you're not standing in the scorching Egyptian desert wearing 60 pounds of bronze armor, wondering if the person bringing you water is actually trying to poison your god